Demon Est Deus Inversus, translated from the Latin, means the devil is God, upside down. This video is from The Secret Doctrine by P Blavatsky, Volume 1, Section 6. Links to the full text as well as the previous videos in this playlist are found in the description box below. In human nature, evil denotes only the polarity of matter and spirit, a struggle for life between the two manifested principles in space and time, which principles are one per se, inasmuch they are rooted in the Absolute. In cosmos, the equilibrium must be preserved. The operations of the two contraries produce harmony, like the centripetal and the centrifugal forces, which are necessary to each other, mutually interdependent, quote, in order that both should live, end quote. If one is arrested, the action of the other will become immediately self-destructive. Since the personification called Satan has been amply analyzed from its triple aspect in the Old Testament, Christian theology, and the ancient Gentile attitude of thought, those who would learn more of it are referred to Volume 2 of Isis Unveiled, Chapter 10 by P Blavatsky. See also several sections in Book 2, Part 2 of this, The Secret Doctrine by P Blavatsky. The present subject is touched upon and fresh explanations attempted for very good reasons. Before we can approach the evolution of physical man and divine man, we have first to master the idea of cyclic evolution, to acquaint ourselves with the philosophies and the beliefs of the four races which preceded our present race, to learn what were the ideas of those titans and those giants, verily, mentally as well as physically. The whole of antiquity was imbued with that philosophy which teaches the involution of spirit into matter, the progressive downward cyclic descent, or active self-conscious evolution. The Alexandrian Gnostics have sufficiently divulged the secret of initiations, and their records are full of, quote, the sliding down of aeons, end quote, and their double qualification of angelic beings and periods, the one the natural evolution of the other. On the other hand, Oriental traditions on both sides of the, quote, black water, the oceans that separate the two Easts, are as full of allegories about the downfall of the pleroma, of that of gods and of devas. One and all, they allegorize and explain the fall as the desire to learn and acquire knowledge, to know. This is the natural sequence of mental evolution, the spiritual becoming transmuted into the material or the physical. The same law of descent into materiality and reascent into spirituality asserted itself during the Christian era, the reaction having stopped only just now in our own special subrace. That which, perhaps 10 millenniums ago, was allegorized in Pymander in a triune character of interpretation, meant as a record of his astronomical, anthropological, and even alchemical fact, namely, the allegory of the 7 reactors breaking through the 7 circles of fire, was dwarfed into one material and anthropomorphic interpretation, the rebellion and the fall of the angels. The multivocal, profoundly philosophical narrative, under its poetical form of the, quote, marriage of heaven and earth, end quote, the love of nature for divine form, and the, quote, heavenly man, enraptured with his own beauty mirrored in nature, or i.e. spirit attracted into matter, has now become, under theological handling, quote, the 7 reactors disobeying Jehovah, self-admiration generating satanic pride, followed by their fall, and Jehovah permitting no worship to be lost except upon himself." End quote. In short, the beautiful planet angels, the glorious cyclic aeons of the ancients, became henceforward synthesized in their most orthodox shape in Samael, the chief of the demons in the Talmud. Quote, "That great serpent with 12 wings that draws down after himself, in his fall, the solar system, or the Titans." End quote. But Schemal, or Shemal, the alter ego of the Sabaean type of Samael, meant in his philosophical and esoteric aspect the, quote, year, end quote, in its astrological evil aspect, its 12 months or wings of unavoidable evils in nature, and in esoteric theogony, both Schemal or Shemal and Samael represented a particular divinity. With the Kabbalists, they are, quote, the spirit of the earth, end quote, the personal God that governs it, identical de facto with Jehovah. For the Talmudists admit themselves that Samael is a god name of one of the 7 Elohim. The Kabbalist, moreover, showed the two, Schemal or Shemal and Samael, as a symbolic form of Saturn, Kronos, the 12 wings standing for the 12 months, and the symbol in its collectively representing a racial cycle. Jehovah and Saturn are also glyphically identical. Now this leads in its turn to a very curious deduction from a Roman Catholic dogma. Many renowned writers belonging to the Latin Church admit a difference exists and should be made between the Uranian Titans and the antediluvian giants, which are also Titans, and those post-diluvian giants in whom they, the Roman Catholics, will see the descendants of the mythical Ham. In clear words, there is a difference to be made between the cosmic, primordial opposing forces, guided by cyclic law, the Atlantean human giants, and the post-diluvian great adepts, whether of the right or of the left hand. At the same time, they show that Michael, or, quote, the generalisms of the fighting celestial host, the bodyguard of Jehovah, end quote, as it would seem, is also a Titan, only with the adjective of, quote, divine before the cognomen. Thus, those, quote, Uranides, end quote, who are called everywhere, quote, divine Titans, and who have rebelled against Kronos, Saturn, are therefore also shown to be the enemies of Samael, and Elohim also and synonymous with Jehovah in his collectivity. They are identical with Michael and his host, Jehovah. In short, the roles are reversed. All the combatants are confused, and no student is able to distinguish clearly which is which. Esoteric explanation may, however, bring some order into this confusion, in which Jehovah becomes Saturn, and Michael and his army, Satan and the rebellious angels, owing to the indiscreet endeavors of the 2 faithful zealots to see in every pagan god a devil. The true meaning is far more philosophical, and the legend of the first, quote, fall of the angels assumes a scientific coloring when correctly understood. Kronos stands for endless, hence immovable, duration without beginning and without end, beyond divided time and beyond space. Those, quote, angels, end quote, genii or devas, who were born to act in space and time, i.e., to break through the 7 circles of the super spiritual planes into the phenomenal or the circumscribed superterrestrial regions, are said allegorically to have rebelled against Kronos and fought the then one living and highest God, Jehovah. In his turn, when Kronos is represented as mutilating Uranus, his father, the meaning of this mutilation is very simple. Absolute time is made to become the finite and the conditioned. A portion is robbed from the whole, thus showing that Saturn, the father of the gods, has been transformed from eternal duration into a limited period of time. Kronos cuts down with his scythe even the longest and to us seemingly endless cycles, yet for all that limited in eternity, and puts down with the same scythe the mightiest rebels. Aye, not one will escape the scythe of time. Praise the god or gods, or flout, or one or both, and that scythe will not be made to tremble 1/1,000,000th of a second in its ascending or its descending course. The Titans of Hesiod's Theogony were copied in Greece from the Suras and the Asuras of India. These Hesiodic Titans, the Uranides, numbered once at a time, was only 6, and have recently been discovered to be 7, the 7th being called Phoreg, in an old fragment relating to the Greek myth. Thus, their identity with the 7 reactors is fully demonstrated. Even Dr. Wilson, who after living surrounded by Brahmins and Pundits in India for so many years, ought to have known better. Even that scholar lost no opportunity to criticize the Hindu scriptures on this account. Thus he exclaimed, quote, "The Puranas constantly teach incompatible doctrines!" Exclamation point. According to this passage, the Supreme Being is not the inert cause of creation only, but exercises the functions of an active providence. Quick reader's note. I did not include most of the footnotes from this section, so you can find out more about Professor Wilson in the footnotes of this portion listed in the description box below. End of footnote, or end of reader's comment. The commentator quotes a text of the Veda in support of this view. Quote, "Universal soul entering into men governs their conduct." End quote. Incongruities, however, are as frequent in the Vedas as they are in the Puranas, quote, less frequent in sober truth than in the Mosaic Bible. But prejudice is great in the hearts of our Orientalists, and especially in those of, quote, the reverend, end quote, scholars. Universal soul is not the inert cause of creation, or para, Brahma, but simply that which we call the 6th principle of intellectual cosmos, on the manifested plane of being. It is Mahat, or Mahabuddhi, the great soul, the vehicle of the spirit, the first primeval reflection of the formless cause, and that which is ever beyond spirit. So much for Professor Wilson's uncalled for fling. As for the apparently incongruous appeal to Vishnu by the defeated gods, the explanation is there in the text of Vishnu Purana, if Orientalists would only notice it. There is Vishnu as Brahma, and Vishnu in his 2 aspects. Philosophy teaches this. There is but one Brahma, quote, essentially Prakriti and spirit, end quote. Therefore, it is not Vishnu, quote, the inert cause of creation, end quote, which exercise the functions of an active providence, but the universal soul, that which Eliphas Levi calls the astral light in its material aspect. And this, quote, soul is in its dual aspect of spirit and of matter, the true anthropomorphic God of the theists. As this God is a personification of that universal creative agent, pure and impure both, owing to its manifested condition and differentiation in this myopic world. It is God and devil, truly. But Dr. Wilson failed to see how Vishnu in this character closely resembles the Lord God of Israel, quote, especially in his policy of deception, temptation, and cunning. In the Vishnu Purana, this is made as plain as can be, for it is said there that, quote, at the conclusion of their prayers, the gods beheld the sovereign deity Hari, Vishnu, armed with the conch, the discus, and the mace, riding on Garuda, end quote. Now, quote, Garuda, end quote, is the Manvantaric cycle, as will be shown in its place. Vishnu, therefore, is the deity in space and time, the peculiar god of the Vaishnavas, a tribal or racial god, as they are called in esoteric philosophy, i.e., one of the many Dhyanas, or gods, or Elohim, one of whom was generally chosen for some special reasons by a nation or by a tribe, and thus became gradually a, quote, god above all gods, end quote. See 2 Chronicles, chapter 2, verse 5. The, quote, highest god as Jehovah, Osiris, Bel, or any other of the 7 regents. Thus, quote, the tree is known by its fruit, end quote, or the nature of a god by his actions. The latter we have either to judge by the dead letter narratives or to accept it allegorically. If we compare the two, Vishnu as the defender and champion of the defeated gods, and Jehovah, the defender and champion of the, quote, chosen people, so-called by antiphrases, no doubt, as it is the Jews who had chosen that, quote, jealous God, we shall find that both use deceit and cunning. They do so in the principles of, quote, the end justifying the means, end quote, in order to have the best of their respective opponents and foes, the demons. Thus, while, according to the Kabbalists, Jehovah assumes the shape of the tempting serpent in the Garden of Eden, also sends Satan with a special mission to tempt Job, and harasses and wearies Pharaoh with Sarah, Abraham's wife, and, quote, hardens his heart against Moses, lest there should be no opportunity for plaguing his victims, quote, with great plagues, end quote. See Genesis 12, as well as the book of Exodus. Vishnu is made in his Purana to resort to a trick no less unworthy of any respectable god, quote, have compassion upon us, O Lord, and protect us, who have come to thee, or succor from the demons, end quote. This pray the defeated gods. Quote, they have seized upon 3 worlds, and appropriated the offerings which are our portion, taking care not to transgress the precepts of the Veda. Although we, as well as they, are parts of thee, engaged as they are in the paths prescribed by the Holy Writ, it is impossible for us to destroy them. Do thou, whose wisdom is immeasurable, Ame Yatman, instruct us in some device by which we may be able to exterminate the enemies of the gods, end quote. Quote, when the mighty Vishnu heard their request, he emitted from his body an illusory form, Mayamoa, quote, the deluder by illusion, end quote, which he gave to the gods, and thus spake, quote, this Mayamoa shall wholly beguile the demons, so that being led astray from the path of the Vedas, they may be put to death. Go then, and fear not. Let this delusive vision precede you. It shall this day be of great service unto you, O gods, end quote. Quote, after this, the great delusion, Mayamoa, descending to earth, beheld the demons engaged in ascetic penances, and approaching them in the semblance of a Digimabara, naked mendicant. With his head shaven, he thus addressed them in gentle accents, quote, O lords of the demon race, wherefore is it that you practice these acts of penances, end quote, etc., etc. See Book 2, Chapter 18, I'm assuming, of the Puranas. And finally, the demons were seduced by the wily talk of Mahamoa, as Eve was seduced by the advice of the serpent. They became apostates to the Vedas. As Dr. Muir translates the passage, quote, the great deceiver, practicing illusion, next beguiled other demons by means of many other sorts of heresy. In a very short time, these asuras, or demons, deluded by the deceiver, who was Vishnu, abandoned the entire system founded on the ordinances of the triple Veda. Some reviled the Vedas, others the gods, others the ceremonial of sacrifice, and yet others the Brahmins. This, they exclaimed, is a doctrine which will not bear discussion. The slaughter of animals in sacrifice is not conducive to religious merit. To say that oblations of fat or butter consumed in the fire produce any future reward is the assertion of a child. If it be a fact that a beast slain in sacrifice is exalted to heaven, then why does not the worshipper slaughter his own father? Infallible utterances do not, great asuras, fall from the skies. It is only assertions founded on reasoning that are accepted by me and by other intelligent persons like yourselves. Thus, by numerous methods, the demons were unsettled by the great deceiver, or reason, gnosis. When they had entered on the path of error, the gods mustered all their energies and approached to battle. Then followed a combat between the gods and the asuras, or the demons, and the latter, who had abandoned the right road, were smitten by the former. In previous times they had been defended by the armor of righteousness which they bore, but when that had been destroyed, they also perished. See the Journal of Royal Asiatic Society, Volume 19, page 302. Whatever may be thought of the Hindus, no enemy of theirs can regard them as fools. A people whose holy men and sages have left to the world the greatest and the most sublime philosophies that ever emanated from the minds of men, must have known the difference between right and wrong. Even a savage can discern white from black, good from bad, and deceit from sincerity and truthfulness. Those who had narrated this event in the biography of their God must have seen that, in this case, it was that God who was the arch-deceiver, and the demons who, quote, never transgressed the precepts of the Vedas, end quote, who had the sunny side in the transaction, and who were the true, quote, gods. Thence There must have been, and there is, a secret meaning hidden under this allegory. In no class of society, in no nation, are deceit and craft considered as divine virtues, except perhaps in the clerical classes of the theologians, as well as the modern Jesuitism. The Vishnu Purana, like all other works of its kind, have passed at a later period into the hands of the temple Brahmins, and have no doubt been once more tampered with by sectarians. But there was a time when the Puranas were esoteric works, and so they are still for the initiates who can read them with the key that is in their possession. Whether the Brahmin initiates will ever give out the full meaning of these allegories is a question which the writer is not too concerned. The present object is to show that while honoring the creative powers in their multiple forms, no philosopher could, or ever has, accepted the allegory for true spirit, except perhaps some philosophers belonging to the present, quote, superior and civilized Christian races, end quote. For, as shown, Jehovah is not one with the superior of Vishnu on the plane of ethics. This is why the occultists and even some Kabbalists, whether they regard or not those creative forces as living and conscious entities, and one does not see why they should not be so accepted, they will never confuse the cause with the effect, and accept the spirit of the earth for Parabrahm or for the Ein Sof. At all events, they know well the true nature of what was called Father Aether by the Greeks, Jupiter, Titan, etc., etc. They know that the soul of the astral light is divine, and its body, the light waves on the lower planes, infernal. This light is symbolized by the magic head in the Zohar, the double face on the double pyramid, the black pyramid rising against a pure white ground, with a white head and face within its black triangle. The white pyramid inverted, the reflection of the first in the dark waters, showing the black reflection of the white face. This is the astral light, or demon Est Deus Inversus. The devil is God reversed. End of, I believe that this is part 6 in my playlist. End of part 6 from volume 1, section 6 of P Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine. Until the next time, love yourselves and love each other unconditionally. Peace.